afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to Books and Beverages in March. Got a treat for you this afternoon. I see many familiar faces here, but also some new faces this time. Books and Beverages is a group of 3 of us who like to introduce new authors, like to give authors the opportunity to air their work, like to talk about new books that have been written, and generally let people come along and tell you about what they're doing and how they do it. So Edwin, as you will have noticed, has been doing all the techie stuff. He records these and puts them onto YouTube. And I have a colleague, Sue, who does the interviewing alternate months generally with me. We meet once a month here, and we sometimes have just one author, and sometimes we have a panel, as we have today. Today it's different. We're going to do poetry today, so I'm really pleased to see so many people here. We all love poetry. We like writing it and reading it. We hope to enthuse you today if you're not already an enthusiast. So I want to introduce you to John Barton Watson, Sheila Whitfield, Caroline Matusiak, and myself, Kate Swann, although I write as Kathleen Swann, but I do prefer Kate. So today we're going to read to you, and we're going to talk about writing poetry. So first of all, I'm going to ask John to read us a poem.
It's called My Prayer. Take me to where the green leaves flow, in the wind and the sea of grass, there to bide where the river flows and watch all life go past. To where the gaze of the yellow moon, its zenith still to pass, will light the darkness and lift the gloom, till the daylight night light is cast. Take me to where the waves so high crash on the sandy beach and boom like thunder, drowned in mist, where tides and locks are breached. For here I will stay as the days pass by and the clouds of memories fade. On the winds from the mountains I'll touch the sky that sweeps over Sandwood Bay. Take me to the river small where pools fade into pools, and the covering trees keep the sunlight dark and the summer woodlands cool. For here I will watch the fish swim by, listen to the bees that swarm, and smell the autumn and the winter and spring, and touch the cold mists of dawn.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
I'm creaking a bit because I know it was for. I wrote it for somebody.
Well, that was lovely. Thank you, John. Sheila, your turn. I have to say that we are all very different poets. We write very different, from very different topics. So, Sheila.
This one's called Wanted Starlings. Recruiting now. Vacancies available for self-driven individuals who are reliable and determined. Training will be provided for suitable candidates. A stabby beak and the ability to strut and bustle are vital to this role, as well as the willingness to work extended hours in summer months. Recruits must be team players, able to work cooperatively. A key responsibility of the role being to oust competitors in the field. But a certain degree of rivalry is considered essential for career progression. Successful applicants will be required to provide their own uniform of flashy coat and beady eye.
Caroline.
I have to stand up. To read poems, so here we go. Oceanic. I see an ocean inside your head, where once we walked on land. The tide has drifted slowly, slowly in, leaving me behind. The current swirls around your feet and calls you out of reach. I stretch out my hand, but you do not recognize the beach. I want to wake you from this dreamy sleep, but you cannot be found. I look to sing a sunny souvenir, but find that it lies drowned. Memories from ocean floor are floating up to you. You grasp them with a child's delight and hold them close once more. I throw a line from yesterday, but you don't know what to do. It slips your hands and leaves your mind struggling and askew. You're drifting, drifting out to sea, delighting in its touch, chatting to the fishes and to the clouds above. I cannot see you now, for tears that roll in with this tide. I just want to take your arm, my dear, and see you know my face, but you are smiling out at sea. The sea kelp ropes around my thigh, and I am left alone, right here, on this stony place.
Thank you, Caroline. And this is called I Took Your Name. I took your name. For a while it sits like a pebble in my hand, unfamiliar, but a comfort to hold as the world around me spins like a carousel. I think it changes me, moves me to a place where others look at me and say, she belongs, she conforms, fits in with the rest of us. So it makes them comfortable, easy in my company. With time, it sidles into a shape as a whole name I recognise, without a twinge of loss, adrift from the past. When we give it to our child, I take possession. Hand it over easily to doctors, teachers, girls in shops, as if it had always been mine. I have grown to fit the shape of it, slid into the hierarchy of women who carried the name before. Our daughter keeps this name, passes it to her girls. As you can hear, all quite different, aren't we? And I'm going to ask Sheila to tell us about her poem. What made you write that, Sheila?
Well, I just happened to be visiting Wetherby, beautiful sunny day, went down by the river and sat on a bench and was minding my own business, and along came a flock of starlings who set about their business around my feet without a glance at me. And I just began to think, if you wrote a job description for starlings, what would it look like? And that was it.
And how long did it take you to write?
Oh, goodness knows. Because I tend to... Poems will often just come on in a one because they've been sitting at the back of my head stewing gently, or I get a first line and then I'm months later finishing it off, so I couldn't say. It's a very variable performance, I'm afraid.
John, you said you wrote your poem for someone. Was that something that came easily and quickly to you?
It wasn't originally for the person, but I dedicated it to a lady, a very good friend of mine who died in 2017. A lovely lady. But before that, I was living on my own for some years, and I was trying to find religion, or what my religion was, always been Church of England. And I went to the church, but I thought I couldn't find the answer somehow. I couldn't imagine me somewhere, somewhere in heaven or something like that. So I thought, where would I want to be? And that's where I'd want to be.
And again, did it take you a long time to write it, or was it something that came easily?
I can't remember now. It wouldn't take me very long. My poems, I just don't take very long. I'm a bit of a fraud, really, because I've written poems all my life from being very young, and I don't know anything about poetry. I don't know the anything, honestly. And when I wrote this book in 2006, I was asked to join a poetry club in a place, and there were all people who knew all about poems that I'd never heard of. I'd never heard of Philip Larkin. I've never heard anybody like that. I've never heard of them. John Betcham and Robbie Burns, and that was my poem knowledge. And of course, I always thought poems had to rhyme until about 20 years ago, and of course they don't. So I've sort of gradually come along, as it were, in this story, you see. And so here I am today, and I don't feel as though I'm a poet, really. I just write poetry, which sounds crazy, but I usually write it very quickly. The poem.
So do you write by instinct and from the
Yes,
heart?
I get well, the next poem I'll be asked to read, I wrote in about 30 minutes. And I was asked, but this is the craziest thing of all. I was giving a talk on the Border Reivers in Hoyuk in the last year in the Border Festival, which is my passion, the Border Reivers. And I read a couple of poems out of my book, and the lady, a historian there, said, would you mind writing me a poem about a battle? And she said, it's the last battle on British soil. Do you know what it is? Of course I said, Culloden. Oh no. It's not Culloden, and I'd be amazed if anybody's heard of it. It's the Battle of Boston. Sorry? No.
That was the last battle.
On British soil. What was the date?
1685.
Oh, yeah, no. Well, the last battle on British soil. Well, if you've got Scotland, Culloden is on Scottish soil and British soil, but this is on English soil. So on English soil, it's the Battle of Bossenden Wood in 1838. I don't suppose I'd never heard of it. So when I got home that night, Googled the Battle of Bossenden Wood and read all about it. Oh yeah, that's great. And I always imagine being in these battles. This is how, when I go to places, I imagine being there, and it just comes to me. And so I took all the things out. A marvellous story, this battle. And since then, we've been down to see where it was. We can't get near it in the wood. It's fenced off by private land. And I phoned her back with it, and she was over the moon.
Right, so we'll hear
Yeah.
that in a minute.
Okay.
So let's just hear from Caroline
yeah.
first of all about her poem.
Thank you. My poem. Well, I had just come back from seeing a couple of friends, and it was obvious there'd been a big change in one of them, which you will see from the poem. And I just came back and sat and wrote this poem. It came out, one of those lovely poems that just fell out. I think there was one or two words I had to actually kind of polish up a little bit, because I kept trying different things to get what I wanted. But no, basically this poem was one that fell out. But initially, it's how do you actually put across something that is a condition, a mental condition? How do you actually do that? So I had to choose. People say that my poems tend to have landscapes. And so in this landscape, I've chosen the ocean. And that mirrors the mind of the person. So there's an external landscape, natural one, the ocean. Then there's also the mind, which is an internal one. And it's kind of capped to join it together by the title, Oceanic, which I gather from the internet is actually a dissociative state of mind. So yes, I came back, cried, and wrote that.
Thank you. And my poem came about from when my daughter was getting married. And I said to her, are you going to be Mrs. No, she said. No, she said, I'm Rachel Swann, that's who I am. I can't change my name, I can't change who I am, that's who I am. And I thought about that for a while. And then I remembered something my mother had said many years ago when she got married, but back in 1939, and she, of course, you never thought about keeping your own name then. So she said, when she had to give up her maiden name, she felt really lost. She felt she had somehow lost herself. And if she had been able to keep her maiden name, she would. And I thought about this, and I thought about who we are, women particularly, obviously, but who we are, and then we become somebody else. So that was where that poem came from. But what about rhyming in poetry? What's the feeling amongst the three of you about rhyming in poetry? Because I read all these 3 books last night, and obviously you've got a lot of rhyming, John.
I didn't know there was anything else. That's the trouble.
But what do you feel about it? Sheila, what do you feel about rhyming?
When I put this collection of poetry together, I realised that I write in a whole range of subjects and in a whole range of styles. And if the subject for some reason falls into rhyme, it rhymes. It's very, very strange, because you start with the idea, and the idea almost like shapes your writing, and that writing falls as it falls on the page. You literally take it out of your head, write it down on the page, and then all of a sudden you find some of them rhyme. Because when you write, as poets, you try and write to a different forms. You'll try and write a villanelle. You've heard about Wendy Cope and a villanelle, so I'll have a go at a villanelle, see how that does. They're quite tricky. All these type of things, pantoums. We all try these out. It's like a bit like flexing your muscles, going to the gym and trying something else. You know, the wall bars when you're used to the monkey ropes and all that sort of thing. So that if it requires a rhyme, it gets a rhyme. That's the only sense I can make.
Caroline, what about you?
If it suits my purpose, then there's a rhyme. I don't set out to rhyme deliberately. There is actually a whisper of a rhyme within Oceanic, but it's more what they call an internal rhyme. I mean, I didn't do it deliberately, but there is an internal rhyme where you've got a face and place, but it's not in the traditional couplet. It's not A, B, A, B all the way through. It just suddenly echoes within the same verse. And it might not be at the end, it might be in the middle of it. So it's not a deliberate thing, but when I read it through afterwards, I thought, actually, there's some words right in that. That's how it went.
So it's not a deliberate thing. It's not, you don't sit down and set.
Sometimes I
decide to. Sometimes you do. Yeah.
Well, I write sonnets, so. Yeah.
Yes. So we come to different forms, I guess, don't we?
Yeah.
Why do you write sonnets, Caroline?
Well, when I first came to Ripon, I came for the writing group. I was one of the winners of the Ripon Poetry Festival, and they said, would I like to go to the writing group? And you sort of think about it for a bit, and you think, writing group, gosh. But anyway, I was sitting in the cathedral, and they've got Wilfred Owen. They have it for Wilfred Owen, and he writes the most beautiful sonnets. And I kind of sat there, and I thought, I would quite like to write some sonnets about Ripon. And so basically, I did. But I found it accessible. There is somebody called Hannah Lowe who's written sonnets called In the Kids. And I found that once I'd read her sonnets, I think she's a Costa Book Prize winner. Once I'd read, I realised they were accessible. I realised they didn't have to be so classic and they could be more informal. And so that is when I got going. And actually, I wrote so many at that time. A friend turned round and said, "You do realise you're speaking in iambic pentameter, don't you?"
Okay, maybe it's time to hear another poem then. John, can we start again with you and hear another poem?
Okay, I'll read the battle out, if I could. And could you give out the...
Yes.
I've brought along a copy of my original writing when I write a poem, because I happened to do it on one sheet of paper, and it was very quick. And that's the Battle of Bossenden Wood. Yeah. I think that's there. If I can find it, I don't think I've got it. That's it, yeah. So I don't normally do this, but I've brought it along because it's today, and this happens to be a poem that I wrote last year, having been asked by the historian to write the poem, and all I did was look on Google to see what it was all about, and it was absolutely fascinating. I haven't got time to go into it now, but wherever I write poetry, usually birds and animals, countryside, comes into it somewhere, and this is what happened here. The Battle of Bossenden Wood. In May, the flowers and trees, birds and animals of Bossenden Wood would have been in their own world. They would have seen the mayhem, heard the pounding of men's feet, rattle of steel, a bravado of shouts, and through the gun smoke, cries of pain in their hopeless endeavour. Martyrs to a revolution now forgotten. Invisible the powers of progress, but manifest the threat, widespread and malevolent, was the oppression of the swing riots. Their leader, a preacher of discontent, took succour from the poor law and the impoverished workers of Bourton, Herne Hill and Dunkirk. Brave men on both sides, both lost now in time. Their bones once strong and flesh once loved, now long cold, back in nature's hands in that glorious garden, which is Kent. Thank you.
Sheila. Give us another.
Right, this one was inspired by Pat Borthwick. Some of you might know the name of Pat Borthwick. She's a well-known poet. I went to a day course of hers a few years ago, and she said, they talk about you writing what you know about. She said, how boring. How about writing what you don't know about? So I thought, I went away with that. And then I happened to be reading a book, and it was describing how they made the dry stone walls across the Yorkshire Dales. And I thought, oh, that's something I don't know about. So I went into it. Not in great depth, but enough that I felt that I could actually go to a dry stone wall and name parts of it, because it's in 3 layers apparently. And this must have been gently stewing in the back of my mind for a while, and then I decided that I was going to write something about it. This gentleman appeared, or this man appeared in my head, and spoke this rhyme. It was literally came from my head straight down onto paper, and surprised me because it's in a slightly different format to the way I write. This is what I was saying about poems deliver themselves somehow, not just in subject but in shape as well. It's called Safekeeping. 50 years at my trade, out in all weathers. Yard by steady yard I've practised my craft on moors, around fields, down dales. Stone by stone I build and rebuild, instinct and experience guiding my hands. Isn't it boring? They ask. Don't you get lonely? They don't quite understand the harmony of glance and heft, of placing and fixing, while plovers call and clouds nudge along the sky. They don't feel that pure satisfaction of making, the laying of foundation stones, building up to the first lift, facings, pinnings, the locking in of the through pieces, up to the second lift to the copestones, and the triumph of placing that last one, the crowning of all my efforts. Lonely? Not when I have my stories to keep me company. I call up a new one every day, each one a memory from my life. Today's is about my grandfather's jacket. Summer's Sunday best, for those holidays by the sea, chapel duty, flower shows. Eventually demoted to allotment use, it was made of rough tweed in a shade neither green nor brown. It still hung in the back kitchen after he died, and I'd sneak out to savour it, rub my cheek against its harshness, inhale the aroma of pipe tobacco, test the blade of his penknife against my thumb. This is the memory I'm laying down today in the middle of my wall. I'll anchor it gently with heartstones to keep it safe.
Thank you.
Caroline.
Yes, so I better read a sonnet, I suppose.
I think you have to.
Right, I'm going to read Nosterfield. Nosterfield is a reserve, a bird reserve just outside Ripon. And it was a quarry, and the quarry have donated it, and they've done a lot of work on it, and so have the local people. And the birds have returned. All these lovely birds have returned, including an osprey. And I just think this is a lovely way of working, because industry, local people, and nature have all worked together to create something wonderful, something that works. And I have had some very good news, which is that the poem that I'm about to read is going to be carved in wood, on wood from Nosterfield, and it's going to be set in the visitor centre. So here is a sonnet. I've done the sonnet, as I say, it's not a classic, it's shaped like a scrape. And I have to stand up, I can't. Right, Nosterfield. Follow the blue splinter dragonfly home to this estuarine, wet, grass map scrape, where striding distant birds, black angles, stick bone, footprint notation across flat silk drape. Their music, flute falls and piping treble. Butterflies in brown skirts flirt and scatter, where Roman adjusted leather sandal on a way known by hunter-gatherer, and the quarry grinds and raises gravel. Along the spit from hawk, birds merge and swoop. Wader beats now shingle shift and shovel, while little egret state plumes bow on loop. Osprey, skylined, waiting, eye stripes swivel. Treetop commander, New Age sentinel.
Thank you, thank you. And I was fortunate enough to be chosen as the winner of the Ripon Poetry Festival last year, over the year 2024. And I'm going to read my winning poem from that. It's called Down Our Street. Down our street, gossip is carried in shopping bags. Front doors are open and cottage walls listen to the chatter of the river. This street is full of new houses, snuggle down between the old, settling in as moss between boulders. Dads go to work past the time of day with a hatless nod, dismissing the weary weather with a shrug, as blackbirds scuttle under hedges and coal is carried on black-sacked backs to store for cooler days. Wicket stumps chalked on a telegraph pole signal the start of summer holidays. Boys bat and girls field, in and out of gardens, skulk behind the church when the death from meningitis leaves a hush of sadness. We are all newcomers, not yet steeped in the tar of this street, and like the farmers' sons or quarry boys who have worked this land over generations, day by day made this village their own. Streetlights cast long shadows over homecoming revellers. Lingering lovers reluctantly unravelled drift away until the scene between night and day frays to the rattle of milk bottles. I've used lots of alliteration and assonance within that poem. Is that something you think about when you're writing your poems? Caroline, do you?
I do, but I don't think about it. I'm thinking more about what I want to mean. I'm thinking more about how it sounds. I'm very into the sound of words and the words and how they fit together. And I'm looking at the spaces between words as well. It's not just what is said sometimes in a poem. Sometimes it's what is not said. So, yes, assonance and all these technical things produce sound, but I'm not looking at the technical aspect. I'm listening in my head, if you like, to the sounds of the words and how they go together and what they represent, and if they're actually doing what I want them to do.
John?
I don't know how to answer this, to be honest.
Well, if you don't, you don't.
Yeah, I don't think of
differently.
anything like that, I'm afraid.
No?
This is why I think I'm really not a poet. When I'd write a poem, I think of what I want to talk about. And the poem I'm going to read next, whenever you want me to, is a simple, straightforward poem about memories of when I was very young. And from a baby, we went to Scarborough for our week's holiday. My father had a week's holiday, 1 week a year. And we went there for the week. And my auntie always had to come. She lived in the road. My auntie lived in the same road. And they always had to come with us. And I went back there. Oh, I'm starting to talk about it now. I'm getting away from what you said. But it's only just, you mentioned Villanelle. I mean, when I just recently read Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, Brave Men Should. Anyway, I know that poem now, but that is a Villanelle. And so I looked up what this Villanelle was on the internet, and the professor went through it stage by stage. And I'm not sure I understood at the end of it what it was. But anyway, it's a fantastic poem, and I know the poem all through now. But I don't write like that. If it feels right, if I get something that feels right, it goes down. Mm-hmm. And I think the best way I can describe that is the battle. And also the lady that I did the poem for the Bossenden Wood, the historian for Scotland Radio was there as well, a lady, Lorna. And she saw the poem, said, "Would you write me a poem?" And I said, "Well, yes, of course. What's it about?" She said, "Waterloo." Because she's bringing out a book this year called Waterloo, and I think it's Waterloo and After, or the Asylum. Anyway, I can't remember what it was. But it's all about, after the Battle of Waterloo, all the men from Scotland came down and they were killed. And they left the wives in London destitute. And they had families, and they had to hand them over to an asylum, not a mental asylum, an asylum. and she found these records of this Caledonian asylum, perfectly laid out in beautiful writing. And I wrote a poem about it, which gave her the feeling. I wanted the feeling, the everything. So I don't know what form it fitted, and I don't know the names of half of the things in poetry, but I just write it as it comes to me.
If it feels right.
It just feels right to me. If it doesn't feel right, I don't put it down.
No.
That's about it.
Sheila, how about you?
Well, I just had to very quickly think about it because I don't quite know. The only thing I can think of is that throughout my life I've read a lot of poetry, and I suspect there's a part of my brain that functions in poetic mode when I want to express my feelings. And that's the only way I can describe it, that I think in a different way, and that's where it's different language to anything else I'd use, like for prose writing or any other imaginative writing. It's just, I don't know, poetic mode.
That's fine. I mean, there is no right way of doing it, is there? There is the way that you do it.
It's only
Yes.
your own way.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. And I mean, I think everybody can write poetry, because I think you can write what you see. But I think also there are people who work at it, and there are people who just write it. Some poetry flows better than others. Some poetry rhymes, but I don't think it's right or wrong. I think you have to just make it your own. And it has to sound right to you.
It's all part of finding your voice, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, it is. Do you write anything else, Sheila? Do you write in other forms?
I think I've probably tried every form is going, because I've led people writing poetry as well. And very often it's a good way of helping somebody find what they're comfortable writing in the poetic side. So I don't think there's much I haven't tried. I don't automatically go on to writing poetry because, believe it or not, it sounds as it rolls off people's tongues, it sounds easy. It's not. It takes a lot of crafting to get the cadences right for writing poetry. I tend not to do that unless I'm doing something like a Lewis Carroll type of one.
But you do write other things, don't you? You write plays and short stories, don't you, Sheila?
Yeah, yes.
Yes. Do you find that having all those three things that you write, do you find that being a poet helps you to write short stories or plays or articles?
I think it's the same skills that you're using all the time, particularly observation. You're people watching, or you're observing nature all the time, and you're reading critically some of the time, reading for pleasure of others, and I think they all feed in. I don't think there's any specific way that you can train to write any specific thing. I think or anything you choose to write is informed by your experience. Yeah.
Caroline, do you write any other form?
I have written minimally, I'm mainly poet, but I have written a couple of short stories, and I have written a talking heads that we all had a good go at. There's some people here smiling away. And that seemed to work. So yes, and I'm working on something different now. I'm working on, because I try to create, in a sense, pictures with my poems, and I'm actually now combining, because I do a bit of painting, and I'm combining the paint with my words now. That's where I'm moving on to.
John, what about your other genres?
Well, really, the only other thing I've done is this book about seasons, the 4 seasons. Yeah. What it is, I read a long time ago a book that had a paragraph in it about autumn, and it was the most fantastic description of autumn that I've ever read. And later on, years and years now, right after now, I thought I can do that. I can write something about summer, something about spring, winter, autumn, and put my photographs in with it. So I've written a book with all the photographs of the different seasons and my description of the season, which isn't poetry. It's a book about all the different things in nature, what happens at that time of the year. That's it. The only trouble is it's too expensive to produce. So I only produced a few and give them to friends. And in the back is the poem I read at the start. That's Autumn in Coverdale. But I love the description. I love countryside. I love the birds and the songs. When anybody asks, I do dawn chorus walks and things like that, and to schools to talk to the children about birds and animals. And but that's the only thing I've ever done that's apart from poetry.
Yes. I think when you're a poet, you do think about the use of words. I think that because in a poem, every word counts.
Thanks.
You can't waste words. You can't use too many words. You can't it won't flow if you don't have your words and your syllables working together properly. So I think that does tend to make anything else you write a little more structured and a little more gathered. Would you agree, Sheila?
I always think that the most important part of poetry is its musicality. And you're writing, I don't know whether musical people here, they talk about cadence. It's the flow of music. And you can also have the flow in writing, spoken writing in particular, yeah. And this is why it's so important that poetry is read out loud, because we have to read our own work out loud to ourselves, because we need to know how it sounds, and because the sound is no point in us reading poetry to you that doesn't sound good, that sounds clunky. You want to listen to something that flows beautifully. So yes, you are constantly on the watch all the time. Whatever language you want to use, that it sounds good when you put those words together. Yeah, that's part of the crafting, but it's part of the crafting you can't teach. It either comes to you or it doesn't, that you've got an ear for whatever you're writing, whether it's poetry, prose, plays.
Caroline, do you have a view on that?
Well, I think if you write, you write, and to a certain extent, it depends what you want to say, what you want to get across. When I did the Talking Heads, it wasn't really, it wouldn't have fitted a poem because there were personalities in it, and these personalities were going to change. They were going to change their view as it moved forward. And so therefore, it took that structure. It may well have been what Sheila calls more loaded than the average prose. I can see that was probably the case. And there'll be interactions between the talking heads. In other words, there will be motifs that somehow follow through, like a little embroidery, if you like. So yes.
Thank you. Right, let's hear another poem then. John, do you want to start us off again?
Okay, this is going back a long time when I wrote this, and I said I went to Scarborough from being a baby. I hadn't gone back for hundreds of years, and I went back about, I don't know, 25 years ago, something. Having never been before, and heck, not doing the thing right. It's my memories of Scarborough when I was from being as young as I can possibly remember. And I went back and it was disappointing. You shouldn't go back. And this is simple, it's just a simple poem. It rhymes because that's all I knew then when I was writing it. But it's all about Scarborough and what we did. There was all sorts of interesting things. But one thing I didn't know about was the windmill in Scarborough, right in the centre of Scarborough. And it's on the south side. Never seen it before, a windmill. And so I imagined the windmill, it was sort of affected all the shops that were poor, and it was affecting the place around it. And then there was the bay, South Bay, with the hotel at the top, and the cricket ground. My father used to book the same lodges every year in North Marine Drive, Gwenny Foster's home cliff. And in the room, believe it or not, we could look straight out onto the cricket ground, which was his love. And then you used to have to go out of the hotel and not come back till 4 o'clock. You were out all day. If it rained, you got in somewhere, or you sat on the seashore or whatever, and you just couldn't go back. It's nothing like it is now. And I went back and, the old memories, and you getting candy floss and all that sort of thing. So Scarborough memories. The windmill's last quixotic stand passed many years ago. No longer by the miller's hand the salt wind sails to blow. Below the cloistered bricks and tiles and roofs and chimneys red, the claustrophobic streets have dried its life stream's stony bed. Its rigged arms in working life turned wheat seed into flour. Kindness would its burial be to seal that final hour. The shops and stores and sea-place fronts, the windmill spreads its pall, an effigy to life long past, my childhood memories call. A dinosaur of modern time stands high above the town, to view through eyes of dusty grime, and a red Victorian gown, a bay that was the country's best, with railings black and gold. The pleasure boats and fish quay stalls drew people to its fold. But still exciting are the gaps of hotels looking through, where just beyond their painted walls the sea lies wide and blue. Upon the vetch's tablecloth atop the lofty cliffs, the ancient castle skeleton surveys the distant ships, the screaming of the kittiwakes, the smell of diesel brine, a walk along the harbour wall, the spinning floss divine. No better seat had Claudius than Holmcliffe's weekly lease, the hallowed cricket ground to view, the gladiator's crease. Thunder as the rough sea waves pounded promenades below, with spray crowds 60 feet or more, leave jetsam far ashore. And last, the toys in coloured shops and fishing nets and canes, the hissing of the Peace Home train and battleships and planes, the putting greens, the North Bay pool, my double-barrelled gun, the coloured shops and sweets and toys have lost their magic fun. But still the memories and days of joy and hired car I see, Mum and Dad and Uncle Joe and Auntie Eth and me.
Do you see what I mean about crafting a poem so it comes out beautifully like that in measured lines? Nice one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sheila.
Oh, right.
There's another.
I think a lot of my poems are inspired by nature. Very fond of nature. Thank you very much to a country school and a nature table in the classroom. And Sorry, I'm losing the track here. I've had a virus for the last couple of weeks and it's just done all things with my head. Nature, yes. So a lot of my poems are inspired by nature, but there's also something else that us poets are meant to do, and that's to make people like you who read us or listen to us see things in a slightly different light. We try and present you with something slightly different. So this is what I've done in this one, I think, hopefully. And it's also what I call a snapshot poem. I'm trying to capture a moment in time. And it's called The 1st of March. A landscape torn away at the edges by winter weather submits itself to the softer touch of spring. In the distance, stark silhouettes of trees are etched against teased out clouds on a thin blue sky. Hillsides are laid with delicate veins of snow. Diagonal intersections of carved hedges cut across swathes of brightening herbage, where dashings of snowdrops advance. A wall has collapsed, crumbled by frost. Verges are edged with listless, ragged foliage. Woodland shows tippets of yellow and olive among desiccated leaves and cast-off branches. Roadside fields are ploughed into synchronized sentences of reddish-brown soil, punctuated by crow commas and the exclamation marks of lone trees.
Well read.
Caroline.
I'm going to read you quite a short one. So you'll have to listen up because it will be over before it started. It's called Owl Hunting. I woke to owl hunting, circlets of soprano looping beneath the planets in silver liquid ring, the field freezing with sugar ice and scuttles of fear. White feather shuttlecocks slicing the night trees, rustling. White, blank heart face with a bead shine eye, turns, calls, spells, a shrill silence in a glance and a wave of wing. I slept to owl haunting that faraway forest of dream.
I think if you don't mind me, but that's an example of Caroline getting you to see something in a completely different, slightly different light.
Yeah.
A different picture. Thank you.
Well, a lot of my poems are about people, observing people, just behaviour. And we have 4 girls. So this poem is called Minding the Gap. You blow into the house like the 4 winds, bickering, nitpicking, arguing about dog food, walking shoes, recycling, looking to me to take sides. Affirm that one of you is the favourite child. Years between you gives status in your minds. Miles apart lets you forget the clan you used to be. All 4 of you think you know where each of you went wrong. Strangely, your sisters don't agree. But a broken washing machine, a cranky car, or a wrecked marriage bring you together. You arrive with food and a bottle, bring music, tools, empathy. I now know the distance between you is a thread of gossamer. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to the audience. Have you got any questions for our poets? We've stunned them into silence.
Yeah. I hope we haven't blinded them with science.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope we've entertained you and given you a little bit of an insight into writing poetry. You can do it, you know, you can all do it. If you just look around you and put it down, it works. Thank you very much for coming, and please thank my excellent colleague.
Thank you.